The Johnson family's trip to Niagara Falls in the summer of 2016 was supposed to be nothing more than a simple weekend getaway. Michael Johnson, a 42-year-old history teacher, had been working long hours during the school year, and his wife Emily, a nurse, had been pulling exhausting night shifts at the hospital. Their two children, Sarah, age 9, and Daniel, age 6, had been begging for an adventure before the start of the new school term. The trip was planned quickly, almost impulsively, and their excitement was infectious. Family friends later recalled how Emily had spoken about finally getting some quality time together, away from everything. On the day they arrived, hotel staff remembered the Johnsons as a warm and cheerful family. They checked into a modest suite, unpacked only lightly, and wasted no time before heading out to the falls. Witnesses said Michael carried his camera slung across his shoulder, eager to capture every moment, while Emily held Daniel's small hand tightly. Sarah skipped ahead, laughing at the mist that rose from the roaring waters. To anyone watching, they looked like a picture-perfect family, happy, relaxed, and ready to make new memories. Later that evening, they dined at a restaurant near the falls. Their waitress, who was one of the last people to see them alive, recalled how Emily seemed mesmerized by the waterfall, staring out of the window as though in a trance. Michael, on the other hand, kept fiddling with his camera, capturing candid shots of his kids even during dinner. They seemed normal, just like any other family, the waitress would say years later. But there was something about the way Emily kept looking at the falls, almost like she couldn't pull her eyes away. The next morning, the Johnsons were seen by fellow tourists near the observation deck. They took turns posing for photos, and one stranger even offered to snap a group picture of them all together. A photo that would later become haunting, as it captured the very last known image of the family alive. The children looked ecstatic, their hair damp from the mist, while Michael and Emily stood close together, smiling with a calmness that, in hindsight, unsettled those who saw it later. What happened after they left that deck remains one of the greatest mysteries in Niagara's history. Their car, a dark blue SUV, was discovered hours later in the parking lot, locked and undisturbed. Inside were their suitcases, Sarah's stuffed rabbit, Daniel's toy truck, and Emily's handbag, everyday belongings that suggested they had every intention of returning. Yet they never did. All that remained outside the car was Michael's camera bag, sitting neatly on the hood, almost as if someone had placed it there on purpose. When authorities were alerted that the Johnson family had failed to return to their hotel, the search began immediately. Local police, park rangers, and volunteers combed through every inch of the area surrounding the falls. Helicopters scanned the churning waters from above, while rescue boats navigated the dangerous currents below. Divers braved the freezing depths in hopes of finding any trace of the missing family. But to their frustration, the mighty Niagara offered no answers. It was as though the Johnsons had simply walked into the mist and evaporated. For investigators, the car was the first and most baffling clue. Parked neatly in the lot, it showed no signs of forced entry or tampering. The doors were locked, the windows intact, and the keys were missing. Inside were neatly packed bags, children's toys, and Emily's wallet containing cash and credit cards. Not a single item suggested foul play, yet outside, on the hood, rested Michael's camera bag, its strap neatly folded as though it had been carefully placed there. Detectives couldn't understand why Michael, known to carry his camera everywhere, would suddenly leave it behind. The surrounding grounds were also searched extensively. Cadaver dogs were brought in, their noses trained to detect even the faintest trace of human remains. They picked up a weak scent near one of the restricted trails, but quickly lost it by the rocky ledges. Investigators marked the area, but found nothing more than slippery stones and the roar of the falls echoing against the cliffs. Some officers privately admitted it felt eerie, almost as if the family had been swallowed whole by the landscape. Witness interviews only deepened the mystery. A couple claimed they had seen a family matching the Johnsons' description walking near a barricaded area close to the rapids, but their statements were vague and conflicted. Another tourist insisted she saw two small children playing near the trail's edge, though she couldn't confirm if they were Sarah and Daniel. Every lead contradicted the next, leaving detectives with nothing solid to pursue. It was like chasing shadows in the mist. What unsettled investigators most was the silence that followed. Normally, in such cases, evidence surfaces, piece of clothing, a shoe, a broken toy drifting downstream. But this time there was nothing. The falls gave up no secrets, and with each passing day, the hope of finding the Johnson family alive grew dimmer, leaving behind only questions, confusion, and a chilling sense that something far stranger than a simple accident had occurred. As weeks turned into months with no progress, speculation around the Johnson family's disappearance grew wild. The case was covered on national news, documentaries, and late-night talk shows. While police maintained that the family most likely slipped into the dangerous waters, many people weren't convinced. The sheer absence of evidence, the lack of bodies, clothing, or even debris, left too many questions unanswered. For locals living near Niagara Falls, the mystery quickly turned into a haunting legend, one whispered about in hushed tones. Online forums became breeding grounds for theories. Some argued the family had staged their own disappearance, escaping debts or responsibilities, by vanishing into another life. Others believed something more sinister was at play, that they had been targeted, kidnapped, and silenced. Conspiracy theorists pointed out the strange placement of Michael's camera bag, suggesting it was left behind intentionally, almost like a warning or a clue. For every explanation offered, another question arose, twisting the mystery into darker and more disturbing territory. One particularly chilling rumor spread after a former park worker anonymously claimed that the Johnsons may have wandered into restricted areas where ordinary tourists were forbidden. These zones, hidden away from the public, contained dangerous caverns and unstable cliffs. The worker hinted that strange things had been reported there for decades. Voices echoing in the mist, sudden disappearances of hikers, and figures spotted moving among the rocks when no one else was present. Authorities dismissed these claims, but the rumor took root and refused to die. Theories weren't limited to the supernatural. Criminal possibilities were also considered. Some investigators quietly suspected human trafficking, or a planned abduction, noting that the border between the US and Canada near Niagara Falls made it a prime location for such crimes. Still, there was no evidence of a struggle, no witnesses to a kidnapping, and no ransom demands ever made. If foul play was involved, it was executed with chilling precision. And then there were those who believed the falls themselves had claimed the Johnsons, not by accident, but by something far older and more sinister. Whispers of legends resurfaced, stories of the falls being a place where spirits lingered, drawing the living closer until they vanished forever. Tourists began leaving flowers near the spot where the Johnsons were last seen, treating the place less like a crime scene and more like a shrine. Each day, the mystery grew, feeding on the uncertainty, and leaving everyone to wonder what really happened to the Johnson family that summer. Despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement, every promising lead collapsed into a frustrating dead end. Teams spent weeks retracing the Johnsons' last known steps, reviewing hours of security footage, interviewing tourists, and mapping out the restricted areas surrounding the falls. But each new piece of information seemed to contradict the last. It was as though the family had stepped off the observation deck and simply ceased to exist. Investigators who had handled dozens of missing person cases admitted privately that this one was different. It felt unnatural. Security cameras around Niagara Falls proved especially frustrating. Authorities scoured hundreds of hours of footage from hotels, restaurants, and public areas. While the Johnsons were seen entering the park, there was no footage of them leaving, no trace of them boarding a bus, getting into another vehicle, or crossing into Canada. Even cameras near the pedestrian bridge showed nothing. For a family of 4 to vanish in one of the most heavily visited tourist attractions in the world, without a single camera capturing their movements, seemed impossible. The most disturbing clue came from Michael's cell phone. For 3 days after the family vanished, his phone continued to ping cell towers in the area. Each signal placed it somewhere near the gorge, as if the device was still being carried around, or worse, deliberately moved. But despite an exhaustive search of the cliffs and wooded areas, the phone was never recovered. The digital trail ended as abruptly as the family's disappearance, adding another layer of mystery that baffled investigators. Tips from the public only clouded the investigation further. Dozens of alleged sightings poured in from both sides of the border. Some claimed to have seen a family resembling the Johnsons at gas stations, on buses, or even walking along rural roads. But each sighting fizzled under scrutiny. Photos were blurry, descriptions vague, and timelines impossible to match. Detectives spent months chasing these leads, wasting valuable time and resources, only to circle back to the same conclusion. No one truly knew what had happened to the Johnson family. As the months dragged into years, the case went cold. Media coverage faded, new tragedies took over the headlines, and the Johnsons became just another unsolved file stacked deep in a cabinet. But for the detectives who had worked the case, something about it continued to gnaw at them. The lack of evidence wasn't just unusual, it was haunting. It was as though the land itself had swallowed the family, leaving behind only silence, unanswered questions, and a chilling sense that the truth was hiding just out of reach. 7 years after the Johnson family vanished, the case was nothing more than a cold file buried in police archives, until an unexpected discovery reignited the mystery. a YouTuber named Ryan Parker, known for exploring abandoned places and filming restricted zones with his drone, decided to capture footage of Niagara Falls from angles tourists could never access. His channel thrived on risky expeditions, but nothing could have prepared him for what his drone would uncover that day. Ryan launched his drone on a foggy morning in June 2023. At first, the flight was routine, soaring above the crashing waters, weaving through pockets of mist, and capturing breathtaking views. But as the drone drifted closer to an off-limits section of the gorge, Ryan noticed something unusual on his monitor. The sharp eye of the camera picked up what looked like a narrow opening in the cliffside, partly concealed by cascading water and heavy vegetation. The entrance was almost invisible to the naked eye, but the drone had caught it, dark, shadowed, and uncomfortably hollow. Curious, Ryan maneuvered the drone closer. As the camera adjusted to the dim lighting inside, he could make out shapes strewn along the floor of the cavern. At first, he assumed they were rocks, tree branches, or debris washed in from the river. But as the drone tilted and the shadows shifted, the outlines grew disturbingly clear. The objects inside weren't jagged or random. They appeared too symmetrical, too human. Ryan's hands trembled as he zoomed in further, realizing he was looking at what seemed to be skeletal remains. The footage grew grainy as the drone's signal weakened, but not before Ryan caught something else. Something even more unsettling. Among the pale shapes inside the cavern was a metallic object, partially covered in silt. Its rectangular form, with what looked like a strap, was unmistakable a video camera. Ryan froze, knowing the Johnson family had disappeared with Michael's prized camera, which had never been recovered. If this was truly the same one, it meant he had stumbled upon the very spot investigators had failed to find for 7 years. Panic and adrenaline surged through him. Ryan immediately pulled the drone back, fearful of losing it in the cavern. His footage was shaky, distorted by mist and interference, but it was enough. He replayed the recording over and over, horrified by what he had discovered. Within hours, he contacted authorities, who confirmed they had never explored that section of the gorge due to its inaccessibility. For the first time in years, the case had a lead. And it came not from seasoned investigators, but from the unblinking eye of a drone. When authorities reviewed Ryan Parker's drone footage, they immediately dispatched a specialized rescue team to the location. The opening was far more treacherous than the footage suggested, concealed behind layers of slick moss, and constantly battered by mist from the falls. Scaling down to the entrance required ropes, harnesses, and steady nerves. As the first team of investigators slipped into the dark cavern, they were struck by the unnatural silence inside. The roar of the waterfall dulled, replaced by the echo of dripping water that reverberated against the damp stone walls. The cave stretched deeper than anyone expected. Flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating jagged rock formations and pools of stagnant water. Just a few yards inside, the searchers froze. Resting against the cave wall were 4 skeletons. Seated upright, their backs pressed against the stone as though someone had carefully arranged them there. The remains were clothed in tatters of fabric that matched what the Johnsons had been wearing the day they vanished. The eerie positioning of the bodies sent shivers down the spine of every investigator present. Closer inspection revealed details that were even more disturbing. Sarah's small skeleton still clutched the decayed remains of a stuffed rabbit, her favorite toy, preserved in the damp cave. Daniel's bones were positioned with his head resting on Emily's shoulder, as though frozen in one final moment of comfort. Michael's skeletal frame sat just beside them, and at his feet, partly buried under layers of silt and stone, lay the long-missing video camera. It was water-damaged, but its form was unmistakable. The eerie question loomed: who had placed the bodies this way, and why? Even more chilling was the fact that there were no signs of collapse, struggle, or accident inside the cave. No evidence of a rockslide, no claw marks on the stone suggesting a desperate attempt to escape, nothing to indicate they had wandered in and become trapped. It looked staged, deliberate, like a tableau designed for someone to find years later. Investigators whispered among themselves, uneasy with the idea that the family hadn't just died here, but had been put here, their story deliberately hidden away. The deeper the team explored, the stranger it became. Strange markings were etched faintly into the rock near the back of the cave. Symbols that didn't match graffiti or natural formations. Combined with the chilling placement of the bodies, it gave the entire scene an almost ritualistic aura. Whatever had happened to the Johnsons, it wasn't just a tragic accident. This cave held secrets, and the discovery of the camera suggested those final moments had been captured, waiting silently for 7 long years to tell their story. The video camera retrieved from the cave was in rough condition, its casing corroded from years of damp exposure. Investigators feared the memory card would be unusable, but forensic experts carefully cleaned and dried the device. When the files were finally accessed, everyone braced themselves. The recordings began harmlessly. Typical vacation footage of the Johnsons smiling at the observation deck, the children playing in the mist, and Emily pointing out rainbows forming above the falls. For a few fleeting moments, the Johnsons were alive again, their laughter echoing through the recovered film. But then, the footage shifted. The camera captured them walking along a path that was clearly marked. Restricted area. Michael's voice could be heard faintly, assuring Emily that it would be fine, that he just wanted to get a better shot of the falls. The children trailed behind, their voices light and innocent, echoing against the rocks. At first, nothing seemed unusual, just a family wandering where they shouldn't. But then Emily's voice suddenly broke the calm. She gasped sharply and pointed toward the mist. The lens swung wildly as Michael turned the camera to follow her line of sight. What the camera revealed next left investigators in stunned silence. In the distance, near the edge of the rocks, a shadowy figure could be seen standing perfectly still. Its outline was human, but its posture was unnatural, rigid, motionless, almost statuesque. The figure appeared to be watching the family, yet it made no movement, no sound. Emily could be heard whispering, "Do you see that?" And Michael, his voice trembling slightly, responded, "Stay close to me." The camera zoomed in, but just as the image began to sharpen, the figure disappeared into the mist as though it had never been there at all. The footage grew more chaotic after that. The children's voices, once playful, now carried hints of fear. Sarah asked if they could go back, while Daniel clung to his mother. The recording shook violently as Michael hurried them along the rocky path, the sound of rushing water louder and more overwhelming with each passing second. At one point, the camera caught brief flashes of something else. Strange shapes etched into the stone walls near the restricted zone, resembling the same markings later found in the cave. Michael muttered something inaudible, his voice drowned out by the roar of the falls. Then came the final, most chilling moment. The footage ended abruptly with a jolt, the screen filling with static. But just before the image cut out completely, a low, distorted sound could be heard beneath the static. Something between a growl and a whisper, far too close to the microphone to have come from the roaring water. The tape went black, and that was the last recorded moment of the Johnson family. To this day, no one has been able to explain what the figure was, what the sounds meant, or how the family ended up seated in that hidden cave as though waiting to be found. And so, what began as a joyful family vacation to one of the world's most breathtaking wonders ended in one of its darkest and most terrifying mysteries. The Johnson family vanished without a trace, only to be discovered 7 years later in a place no human eye was ever meant to see. Their final footage raised more questions than answers. Who, or what, was that shadow in the mist? And why were their bodies arranged so deliberately inside the cave? To this day, no explanation has satisfied investigators, and the truth remains buried beneath the roar of Niagara Falls. Was it a tragic accident, an unspeakable crime, or something far more sinister, something beyond our understanding? Perhaps the answers are still hidden in those cliffs, waiting to be uncovered. One thing is certain: when you stand near the edge of Niagara Falls, surrounded by mist and thunder, you might feel the same unsettling presence the Johnson family encountered. And if you look closely enough into the fog, you may just find that something is looking back at you.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.